You have to understand the way television production works on a network television show. They decide in May what's going to be on the schedule for the next year. And by mid-July, you're shooting nonstop until you've done your initial episode order, which is usually about 13 episodes. And if it goes well, you hope to get 9 more for 22 for the year.
So we made the show, and like I say, I think there was a lot of ambivalence on the network's part because they didn't quite know what to do with it. It tested quite well, as I remember, and critically it was very well received, and that always helps. I remember we were on the cover of TV Guide, and I knew where Les was for some reason. And I actually went into the CBS building and went up to whatever floor he was on. He was at a reception for something. I went over to him and I went, "We're on the cover of TV Guide." Because I wanted him to know, because I could feel it. It wasn't a sure thing that we were going to get renewed, you know. Anything we could do to, help. But when you're building a network, what you're really looking for are big, powerful hit shows and franchises that you can launch things with. And we weren't one of those. When Les sort of challenged me to do a show the truth was Moonlighting, which I'm enormously proud of. And it's public knowledge. It was a horribly run show, and it was a horribly run show, and I ran it because I had never been on a show. I didn't have any experience. I was on Remington Steele for 10 episodes. I was on Taxi for 1 episode. I had no idea what I was doing, and there was no studio. We didn't make it with a studio, so I was on my own, sort of learning as I went. That was a fortuitous thing because I had no interest in making a television show like everybody else was making one, but it was a bad thing because I developed a lot of bad habits. The show was popular and successful enough that I was able to move to movies, but when I came back to television, my great fear was I still don't really know how to make a television show in the way that really well-made, well-run television shows were done. When I would run into someone who made a television show, I'd say, "Tell me about your process." Because I was a big snob. I wanted to make movies. I had no interest in doing television. So for me, a lot of it was me trying to keep myself awake. I need to keep it interesting and artistically invigorating on some level. First of all, it was at a time when no one was making television in New York City. Now everybody's making television in New York City. But back then it was a very difficult place to make television shows and movies because it was very expensive and the unions were not accommodating and all that kind of stuff. Having said that, I adored the people I was working with. Henry Bronchtein produced the pilot with me. He's a terrific line producer. We did the pilot together. And I said to him, come do the show with me. And he said, "I would love to, but I did a pilot before yours and I made a commitment to them." I said, "Well, what did you do?" And he said, "I did this show for HBO called Sopranos." And I said, "You're going to do a show about opera people? Why would you do that?" And he said, "I think it's going to be pretty good." And we kind of left it at that. Of course, then the show premiered and I understood. And my old friend, Ron Schwary, who I'd always had designs to work with but had never had a chance to work with, was living in New York at the time and said, "Hey, do this with me." And we worked together after that for like 14, 15 years. And Ron is an amazing, amazing producer, produced all these amazing movies. The first movie he produced, he won the Academy Award for, which was Ordinary People. He produced movies for Sidney Pollack and Robert Redford and Barbra Streisand, and just a real world-class producer. And to get somebody of that caliber to do television at that particular moment was very unusual, but was key to really making the whole thing work.
Well, I've known Glenn since 1985. I get this call. He says, "Ron, it's Glenn Caron. Hi, how are you?" He says, "So are you still doing features or are you interested in television?" I said, "No, I'm interested in television. What is it?" He explained the storyline to me and I said, "Who's in it?" And he said, "Well, there's Dennis Haysbert and Margaret Colin." I said, "Who else?" And he said, "Well, there's this guy you would know." And I said, "Well, who?" And he said, "Eric Close." And I went, "Oh my God." And he said, "Why, you know him?" And I says, "For a very long time."
Our producer, Ron Schwary, I met him when I was still in college. I was deciding whether I was going to become an actor or not, and he was an alumni of USC's film school, and he was also an alumni of my fraternity. I was a Sigma Chi at USC. And he came to an alumni day when I think I was a senior in college. And so I pursued him.
I did this speech and left the speech and was walking towards my car, and I heard this, "Mr. Schwary, Mr. Schwary." And I turned around and he says, "Do you have 5 minutes? Can I buy you a cup of coffee? I really would like to talk to you." I said, "No, really, I have to go." He said, "Come on, John Wayne was your mentor, and you've been my mentor, and I'm hoping that I'd meet you, and can I buy you a cup of coffee?" And I said, "Okay." So I sat down with him, and I says, "What can I do?" He said, "I want to be an actor." I said, "Oh, you got to change your mind."
In a way, he kind of discouraged me. He said, "Go ahead and get into production. You know, you'll enjoy that more."
But we talked, and how dedicated he was, and I could see it. I could see the passion, but I backed up years ago when I had my passion to meet Cecil B. DeMille, and then I didn't get a chance to do it, but I said, "Okay." He said, "What should I do?" And I says, "Get that face of yours." He was very, very, very good looking, and he had that surfer look, and I says, "Get that face to as many agents as you can. So, and stay in touch with me. Here's my number, call me if you have a question."
So he was doing a movie called Havana with Robert Redford. And they were on the Warner Brothers lot. And I just happened to have an audition one day because I decided I was going to pursue acting. And I took a headshot and I found Ron's car at the Havana production offices, and I wrote a note on it. I said, "Just wanted to let you know that I'm up for the challenge. I know you said it's going to be a tough road, but I'm going for it. I'll keep you posted on what I'm doing. You know, Eric," close. Put on there. Well, he loved that I did that. He thought that was, you know, he liked the, what do you call it, chutzpah or whatever. And so he dropped me a line and he said, "Hey, I got your photo, and I'm gonna keep an eye on you, kid." And he always calls me kiddo or kid, you know, right? He goes, "I'm gonna keep an eye on you, kid," you know. And so Ron said, "I'll, you know, just keep me posted when you get jobs." Well, I ended up getting a reoccurring role on a show called Sisters, which was a Warner Brothers show. And this was right before I did Dark Skies.
And then I was directing an episode of Sisters. And I went in, I did the location scouts as a director, and I see Eric close.
We were, you know, thrilled about the fact that, you know, it was becoming a reality. Here's a guy who said, "You should think about production. I don't know if the acting's gonna work out for you, you know, it's a tough road." And here's Ron, who was pursuing a career as a director because he'd been producing all these big movies, and he's like, "I want to direct." So here he comes, and I'm an actor, and he's a director, and now we're working together. So that was really cool. Well, then we kind of parted ways, and we stayed in touch over the years.
But we never did anything until Glenn called me up and said, "Oh, there's this, I don't know if you know him, but he's a really good actor, Eric Close." And I said, "Oh, do I know him?"
Picks up the phone and calls me, says, "Hey kid, you're not gonna believe who I'm standing with." And I'm, "Who, Ron?" "I'm here with Glenn, who just cast you in Now and Again. We're working together." So it all came full circle. We did this series together and had an absolute time of our life. It was a blast. And Ron's a great friend to this day. We stay in touch and call each other on our birthdays and try to get together when we can. So that's just cool to think that I was in college when I first connected with Ron, just sort of chasing that dream, you know, thinking this is what I want to do. You know, all of us, we start out, you know, if you've got this dream, and I always tell college students or young students that, you know, I said, if you really have a dream and you're passionate about it, don't give up on it. Don't let anybody discourage you. And then next thing you know, one of my mentors, Ron, and I are working together.
Guys, are you letting him go out?
This is how you make a hit series.
Yes. Okay, let's do this.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
Am I in right here? My hand in here? In?
When Now and Again was picked up, to do the pilot, we shot it in New York, and then once they ordered the series, then my wife and I rented out our home. We had a almost 1-year-old daughter, our daughter Katie, who's now 15, almost 16, almost driving. And we packed up and moved to New York, found a great apartment on the Upper West Side. And I love New York City. I would shoot there all the time. It's fantastic. The city is a character in itself, and so many diverse looks.
We had a great time. And because I have done so many films in New York, and I knew all the labor guys, I knew all the electricians who would have loved to have had the incentives that they have now. But we made some good deals and got through it. It's the relationship I have with Glenn. He trusted me 100%. And in return, I would give him as much as, or more of what he needed to get the episode he wrote. I was on set all the time. I operated on set and on location. If the call was 7 a.m., I'd be there 7 a.m. If we wrapped at 9 o'clock at night, I would wrap at 9 o'clock at night. I like being on the set because Glenn would feel better. We were there was only me, I was the only one in charge, there was nobody, overlooking my stuff. I'd get the scripts, we'd get them ready, and we'd make them. I left him alone doing my stuff so he wouldn't feel like he was under the gun, even though in my eyes sometimes I'd say, we need more than 4 pages, And he'd come through, he'd come through. He'd be there in the room while we were still shooting.
The truth is, it was a very complicated show, a very difficult show to execute. Having said that, Ron Schwary was a magician and did an amazing job, and we were doing the best we could. Here in California, when you make a television show, because you can reasonably assume that most days you're going to have good weather, you can move to so many locations on a given day. In New York, because traffic is always in an extraordinary gridlock and you're dealing in a very small area, once you bring your company to a location, let's say a courthouse, you can't assume that even though there's 3 hours left to the shooting day that you can move to a candy store that even 7 blocks away is an enormous feat. And particularly, again, back then, because the city was not accommodating a film, they weren't interested in that business. Those sorts of things really throw you for a loop. And then you wake up and you have that, and oops, it snowed.
There's a wonderful moment, where there's this huge snowstorm, and he comes to the house and the snow is falling, and it's real. I mean, it was a huge snowstorm that hit New York for several days. But I remember, I think that was the last day we were able to shoot, or it started that night, and it was a beautiful film, but the next morning there was so much snow that part of the stage collapsed and flooded. And, it's a disaster. We can't shoot today.
Every time it would rain, literally the sets would flood, and we'd have to call the insurance company and not shoot that day. And there was part of me that would breathe a sigh of relief. Oh, good, because we were behind on scripts and things, and we could catch up a little bit.
I'll never forget Glenn, the look of Glenn, when Glenn realizing we can't shoot today. I have a day to catch up on things, and it's not my fault. He was practically doing a little jig inside, because it was we have insurance for things that are for acts of God, and so it was a free day, for him to catch up on the schedule a little bit.
I've done a lot of television. I've done several television shows that shot in New York, but nothing like Now and Again.
Well, first of all, you have to understand you're coming to work in New York. So when the van would come and pick me up at 5 o'clock or so in the morning, we'd be passing clubs and restaurants and everything else, and people were coming out and going home as I was getting out and going to work. So it was fascinating going through New York to get to Silver Cup and start work every day. To have New York as a backdrop, what better backdrop can you have for a TV series than New York City? So, it was an extra character.
And the beautiful lighting, the beautiful reflected images in the city as the sun goes down, and beautiful couples. And then there's this gorgeous young man pursuing this, gorgeous young woman, this middle-aged woman in the streets of New York, and there was one, he was leaping, they had him harnessed, he was leaping from truck to truck and kind of playing a little, it felt like, hide and seek. He just wanted to see his wife. Can I buy you a pair of shoes? And I'm, of course, terrified. What is this person I don't know or recognize following me around. I had no idea how it was going to come out. I was just as fascinated as the viewers were.
As much as New York is this city that never sleeps in a sense, Wall Street was completely the opposite. So during the day, Wall Street's just hustling and bustling. Well, at night, it's a ghost town. I mean, you go down there and the wind's howling through the streets and there's no one there and paper blowing around. And we would go down and take over that area of the island of Manhattan. And I mean, I remember scenes of me just running, running down the street. I remember there was a scene where I had been all cut up and because I had bashed through that window and I've got like this like a dress coat on, and I'm just running barefoot down the middle of the street chasing Lisa's limousine because she's going out on some date. I remember as I was running along and doing push-ups to kind of stay pumped up a little bit. You gotta bust out some push-ups. I was doing push-ups in the middle of, I don't know if it was Broadway or wherever it was, but I said, I can't believe I'm doing this. I mean, who gets to do this? Who gets to stop traffic in the middle of Manhattan and run down the middle of the street and do push-ups and jump over cabs? And we really, really utilized the city. I mean, we took advantage of everything that city had to offer, and we barely touched the tip of the iceberg. I mean, had we gone, on for years, it would have just covered that city and probably still never, seen it all. It was demanding because we would do long days, so you're acting and you're doing your, Glenn likes to write a lot of words, so your mind had to be really focused on, being able to learn the material and be prepared. And then on top of that, I had to find time in between scenes to work out. I'd work out in my trailer. I had, weights in there. They had weights on set. There was, you remember in Michael's sort of dorm room, if you will, he had weights, so I was always in there doing pull-ups and working out. Often, after, a 16-hour day, I would come home, kiss my wife and daughter goodnight. Often my daughter was already asleep, and then I would run across the street to the fitness club and work out for another hour and a half. And then get up 4 or 5 in the morning the next day and go back and do it all over again. And I remember running on the treadmill and literally waving across Broadway to the building we're living at, my wife and daughter, and they're waving at me out the window, and I'm like cooking along on the treadmill and just waving back and blowing kisses. So it was tough, and I really had to watch what I ate. And there were times where literally I would get up in the morning and I would get half a piece of sodium bread, toast it, throw a dollop of mustard on it and a scoop of either like tuna fish, or I would do a little piece of bread with a little thing of peanut butter, and that's all I would eat for breakfast. I mean, I was really watching what I was eating so I could stay yoked, if you will. I remember working several times sick as a dog, just like bronchitis or, just on the verge of pneumonia, just feverish and really sick and just like grinding through. I mean, all that being said, I loved it. It was, I was living the dream, being the lead of a highly anticipated television series, and just being in New York City and getting a chance to carry that responsibility and working with such a great cast and crew. I would never have traded that.
There was a scene where Margaret Colin has a meeting with Chad Lowe. Margaret went to Glenn, who was visiting the set. She said, how do I end it? Because in the dialogue it says, it doesn't seem like I would just get up because I'm having this long talk.
You are interested in a loan?
I am interested in the $1 million you owe me from my husband's life insurance policy. But since you have indicated very clearly that will not be forthcoming anytime soon, I was wondering if the loan offer was still valid.
Money troubles?
Glenn said, so throw the drink in his face. Don't tell him. And so we told the cameraman, operator, okay, rehearse, let's do the rehearsal.
Why do you hate us so much?
Hate you? I barely know you.
Then why?
Your husband went into court and for all intents and purposes told a jury that Grand Empire, his employer, was obligated to pay out almost $400 million. $400 million that I and a great many other people believe we could have saved had your late husband simply said what he was asked to say. So no, I will not be glibly paying out his death benefit.
And in my mind, I'm remembering, do we have 2 shirts? I wonder if we have 2 shirts. But at that point, I didn't care because it was such a great idea. I didn't want to lose the momentum, so we rolled. And she did the scene, and she threw that thing. And I'm telling you, the look on Chad Fisher's face was, I remember it to this day. Cut, okay, print. No, maybe we should do another one. I said, no, you don't need another one. You don't need another one.
She would have some depth that she would bring that would help kind of me find something in the character. And then she would throw a drink in my face, which was, I think she apologized after she did that, but I thought it was kind of great. I'd never done a scene where somebody threw a drink. It happened to me in real life many times, but having her throw that drink in my face, I just remember that scene particularly. I remember we were shooting somewhere, again, practical location, somewhere in Manhattan in a bar restaurant, and that was really fun, that scene.
They made the insurance guys, the bad guys, way ahead of the rest of the world, making insurance companies the bad guys. God bless him. I loved working with Chad. I think he's a terrific actor. I think he got just enough mustache twisting, but also put a slick veneer on it. I do remember a lot of improv with him. I do remember, a fair more than with anybody else.
I remember we both felt really good about the writing and about where, the story that we were telling with that scene in particular. And then to have it all culminate with a drink in the face is, kind of an added bonus.
I remember there was a wonderful kiss between Eric and Margaret on a subway platform, and I had this kiss in my head, how it would be shot and what it would be, and I think I drove Eric a little crazy, telling him how to kiss Margaret.
It's supposed to be one of those cinematic kisses, and we're in a subway. It's going to be this panoramic shot. They're going to take it from so many different times with I think at least 2 cameras running. Gorgeous, and you could feel that it was going to be breathtaking for the audience because it was kind of really fun in a stinking New York subway to film it. For a guy who doesn't know his own shoe size, you clean up very nicely.
You can thank me later.
What's the deal with the police escort? You're running for office?
What are you all doing here?
To be completely honest, I'm not sure.
Get in the next car, now!
What?
Go!
And Eric and I are not of the same generation. Part of the thing is that he is younger than I am, so our points of references are different. So I'm thinking like, a scarlet and red bone-crushing kiss. And the way that Glenn and I had talked about it was, so Eric does a really good job. It's a nice kiss, but it's not that kind of a kiss. So I say that to Glenn. And Glenn's like, yeah, how are we gonna get him to do it?
We have this great kiss in the subway where the thing's going around and she's holding on to the poison egg.
I know he likes me, and he said that Eric had a crush on me from movies and stuff, so which is always lovely. So well, somebody has to tell him. Glenn's like, I don't know how to tell him. I said, somebody has to tell him how to kiss me.
Lisa! Look, I'm in a hurry and I need your help. I need you to hold this egg.
Stay away from us.
Why don't you give me your little egg? She's pretty upset. Lisa, you didn't hear me. I need your help.
Did you take her upstairs?
Yes.
Excuse me, but aren't you the guy who just yelled at me in front of a train full of people and ordered me to go?
Yes,
well,
but
consider me gone. He said, I just want to get what you wrote, and I think it's a bone-crushing kiss. And then Glenn went over and I stepped to the side and I watched him and said, oh no, man, you got to line it all up. You got to have as many parts of the bodies touching as you can. This kiss is going to last you a long time. He goes, and crush her. So then Glenn actually demonstrated it. He came up and he lined everything up and he grabbed me in his arms and I went, and then he put his face here. He didn't actually, there was no lip contact. And then Eric goes, I think I can do it. And Eric could do it. Stop saying my name like you've known me for 1,000,000 years, and stop acting so familiar. You are completely unfamiliar. In fact, you're crazy. You're a crazy man walking around asking people to hold his eggs. Screw you! It's both of us trying to get that kiss that will help the audience believe in this love.
You're the person in the world I trust most. Take this up to the street. Give it to a Dr. Theodore Morris. Just ask for him. He'll be up there with the police. And don't ask me why, but whatever you do, don't drop it and don't crack it.
Okay.
And don't hold this against me.
Okay, I won't. And of course, she remembers that. She knows what she's feeling when this young man kisses her. She know, you know, and the feeling is the kiss of her husband, this huge love of her life. So how fun that it would play in your nerve connections and all, in your heart's yearning at the same time, in the subway.
I remember watching that episode with my wife, and my wife like reaches over and grabs my arm, and she says, "That is an amazing kiss." And I thought, yeah, coming from your wife, it was just an amazing, magical moment in that, and I got to kiss Margaret Colin, which was pretty cool.
And then he mixes it up with this nightmare story of this egg and this poison thing. And I remember, God bless my mother, she watched it and she started crying. She goes, "That's just too real."
We did the Eggman thing, and I was very proud of it. I thought it was pretty good. And then we sent the show out, and Esquire wrote this thing about that opening, where they said, like, the scariest 2 minutes of television in the history of television, something like that, which I was very flattered, you know, Esquire. I thought, wow, cool. I didn't realize it was that harrowing, but, you know, great that it is.
The stakes were so high, so it was so romantic, and then it was so, you know, pre-9/11. We could never have gotten away with it, ever. It was, you know, I don't think it was foreshadowing, but it was definitely terrorism. And he really shot it, wrote it beautifully, and scared the audience with it, you know.
And we were also doing special effects at a moment when the way special effects were done were going through a monumental change. We were changing really from sort of an analog world to a digital world, but the digital world had not fully implanted itself and wasn't working yet at an economic level where it made sense for television. So we were doing sort of the beginnings of digital special effects, but we would come up with these things. I remember bees. We did 2 episodes with bees, and digital bees, and it's just constantly running over to the special effects house and looking at things and comping things, and it was pretty nuts. But it was very expensive, and I think that also was an irritant for the network. Why are we paying these exorbitant fees for a show that's only attracting a moderate audience, but it's not an enormous audience?
It was mind-blowing. It was just what they wanted to do on weekly television and what they did do. I'd never seen anything like it.
Give me a sign.